So this webinar fits within an Energy Cities hub activity. So Sarah, if you can go on to the Energy Cities hubs page. So within Energy Cities, we for many years have been working on the transition to future-proof cities, and we have been doing that via a number of hubs. We have 5 hubs at the moment, and this afternoon's event is within the hub, which focuses on community-led energy for massive renewable production. And within these hubs, we like to have a mixture of activities which range from doing policy work to doing capacity building, and of course, your normal exchange between experts. Just so that you know, very soon we are going to be launching the second session of our Espresso course, which is a course for local authorities on the subject of community energy. And if any of you would like to know anything more about that, it would be great if you could register to this hub. You'll find all the information on our website. Now, on to today's webinar. So if you can go on to the next page, please. So we have 3 speakers for you today. There's Bram, Annie, and Sara. First of all, Annie, she's the director of the Resource Platform, which is an alliance of stakeholders representing clean energy buyers and suppliers. And Annie leads the platform's energy buyer engagement and advocacy activities, which advance ReSource's mission to support more corporate buyers to procure renewable energy. Bram is the senior advisor and power team lead at the RAP, which is a regulatory assistance project. His personal focus is on market design, renewables, and sector integration. So before he joined RAP, which was in 2020, he was the Director General of the Organization for Sustainable Energy in Belgium. And before that, he was working in the US, where he served as the Renewable Energy Deputy Director for the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. And finally, my colleague, Sara. So Sara, she's been working at Energy City since 2018. She currently coordinates the communication team and leads advocacy activities for this hub that we're talking about, which is the local ownership of renewables. And she also coordinates the Energy Cities Hub, having co-authored a number of different publications within this topic. And today she'll be sharing one of them. So quick overview of what's happening in today's webinar. From 2:30 to 2:40, so we're probably slightly ahead of time, just doing the introduction. Then Bram, he'll be focusing on res contracting with the EU regulatory framework and political contexts. Then after Bram, we'll have Sara, who will be focusing on power purchase agreements and the link with what cities can do to make the most of these of what we call the PPAs. After that, we'll be having Annie, who we will be talking about the tools, knowledge, and experience from renewable energy buyers and suppliers. Hopefully, we will finish with 10 to 15 minutes time to have some discussion with you. We'll see how we manage that. That can either will be via you putting questions in the chat. Please note that if you do have questions during the presentations, that we'll only be dealing with them after the 3 presentations. So please be patient. Is that everything fine with everyone? I think we'll then head on to our first presentation of around 10 to 15 minutes by Bram. So over to you, Bram.
Thanks, Ian. I'll pull up my presentation.
Excellent. Just another thing, maybe when Bram is speaking, we can turn our, to just for bandwidth, potentially turn our video cameras off if possible. I will just do that myself, if I can remember how to do it.
Just checking, do you see the slide
Yeah, all
unfold?
good, all good.
Yep.
Thanks,
All right.
Bram. Over to you. Yeah,
Great.
15 minutes.
Thank you. Yep. So I'll give a bit of an introduction, give you some context of why we're talking about long-term contracts for renewables and PPAs in particular, and also give you a bit of the recent regulatory changes that should enable more uptake of renewable PPAs, and hopefully, in particular, by local governments and cities and towns. Now, before diving in, it's probably not a bad thing to spell out a bit more what PPAs are. PPA is an acronym that stands for Power Purchase Agreement. And in very broad terms, it's really a contract, a commercial contract between, on the one hand, a renewable electricity producer, and on the other hand, an off-taker, so somebody that buys the electricity produced by solar or wind or some other kind of renewable electricity power project. Often between those two, the producer and the off-taker, there is a third party to facilitate the exchange, to provide balancing services or other services to make sure that everything goes smoothly. And usually also these contracts are considered to be long-term, meaning that they range from anywhere between 5, 15, 20 years. Depends really on what the two parties agree on, but they shouldn't be very short, like a year or 2-year contract wouldn't be what we are interested in this context. Now, they are a way to share risk. Risk is, of course, something that comes with a cost. A PPA, a contract, shares that risk between the parties involved. If the risk is shared away from the company or the entity investing. Yeah, so the PPA shares the risk between the producer and the off-taker. Since part of the risk is therefore moved away from the electricity producer and the organization investing in solar and wind, that makes it easier for that organization to get lower cost financing. And the cost to get capital, to get money to invest in that project is cheaper, which then of course translate into a lower electricity cost. So the electricity produced by the solar or the wind farm becomes cheaper for the consumer. So that's kind of the idea. Now, in recent discussions, you may have also heard about contracts for difference, which are in the type of contracts very similar, but there's an important difference, and it's important to make that distinction. In the definitions that we use in these discussions, contract for difference, a CFD, is a contract where the counterparty on the offtake side is a public entity. For example, a transmission system operator or another government entity that then can socialize the cost of the contract across consumers or taxpayers. Now, they are interesting. They have grown in interest, and they are considered renewable energy support schemes because it's a way for governments to support new investments in renewables. So on the one hand, PPAs, which are commercial contracts, and on the other hand, CFDs, which are a smart new way of supporting renewable investments. So why are we particularly interested in these contracts now? course, as you all know, we are slowly moving away from a very big price crisis in Europe, where following the invasion by Russia in Ukraine, gas prices peaked to unprecedented levels, and because of the gas price peak, also electricity prices peaked to very high levels, which of course led to a range of crisis measures, but also, of course, a lot of nervousness around price volatility. So the rise and fall of electricity prices and what that means for consumers. And in that context, long-term contracts like PPAs have gained prominence as a answer to price volatility, because it stabilizes. It's supposed to stabilize electricity prices for consumers. Also provide more security for the investors in renewables, who are also nervous about high price volatility. And of course also is leading to lower prices compared to the short-term spot market prices that we have seen. And so on this slide, you see on the left-hand side it's an index held or calculated by a company called Pexapark that keeps track of PPA deals across Europe, and they keep track of how the outlook is for new PPA contracts. And as you can see, in the beginning of 2024, we're again at a level for 5 years, after 5-year average of PPAs that is much lower than what it used to be, and indicating that there is an interest on the consumer side to enter into these deals again. And interestingly, also they compare 5-year versus 10-year PPA price signals, with unsurprisingly for the consumer a interest in signing longer term deals, because they will generally offer lower price PPAs. In this case, between the countries considered, it's on average 18 euros per megawatt hour difference between 10 and 5-year contracts. So that's quite interesting. Of course, you do need to then lock in your contract for 10 years and make assumptions about what you think the power price will do. But so this was the context of the power market and why these long-term contracts have risen in interest, which led to a range of crisis measures, but also led to an effort to further improve the structural way that the electricity market in Europe works, initiated by the European Commission at the start of 2023, and also concluded by the end of 2023, which was quite quick as European processes go. The goal was to enhance stability and predictability, and protect and empower consumers. So I think that's right in the heart of the discussion that we're having here. The overall goal was to increase, or one of the goals, because it was more than about only long-term contracts, but one of the goals was definitely to improve the market for long-term contracts with, and that's important to stress here, a healthy mix of PPAs, the commercial contracts, and smart CFDs with public entities. Now, what came out of these discussions specifically for PPAs is some reinforcement of existing regulation that was trying to support PPAs, but also some new provisions. And I summarize them here. with at the bottom of the slide also the link to the full text if you are so inclined. The result of the reform was that member states really need to do their best to promote the uptake of PPAs by actively removing barriers and charges on PPAs, which was existing language but reinforced. New was that the EU is going to check the viability of market platforms for PPAs, which is interesting in the sense that it should enable smaller off-takers to maybe bundle together with others and become a more interesting party to sign PPA deals with large renewable generators, for example. Much attention went to specific financial support for PPAs. Member states will now get the explicit option to provide guarantee schemes for PPAs, specifically for consumers or customers facing entry barriers. So customers that have a hard time entering the PPA market, that can maybe not offer the price that is desired by the sellers. For those customers, governments can set up a guarantee scheme, so de-risking some of those deals and making them more achievable. Also interesting is the fourth one here, where you can combine a PPA and a CFD. This is interesting for the developers of renewable energy projects. They can, if it's, for example, a wind farm, they can say, well, we're going to offer 40% of what we produce in a CFD auction, so public support, and then sell the rest mostly through PPAs and maybe a bit on the spot market, which is interesting. And then finally, ACER, which is the agency grouping all the energy regulators at the European level. ACER is going to assess the PPA market, produce, I think, annual reports, and interestingly also look at standardization or providing standards for voluntary PPA contracts, which I'm sure Annie will have some views on too. So that's it for me. I hope that was useful. And Ian, back to you.
Excellent, great. Thanks a lot. Way within the time. We'll now hand over to my colleague, Sara. So over to you, Sara.
Thank you, Ian. I will share my screen. Yes, indeed. Here I would like to share a bit the result of this briefing that Energy Cities and RAP did together and was published at the beginning of the year. The briefing is that, of course, includes information also on what are PPAs and the different type of PPAs. But here now I would like to focus on the bit that is more about municipalities and how they can make the most of PPAs. So first of all, I think it's important to say that because of their energy needs, municipalities can have really an influence on the renewables that are fed into the grid. And so they can really support project developers via PPAs to facilitate their revenue stability so that they can invest with confidence and they can also get loans from bank for their project. Purchasing power via PPA can be really a useful tool for municipalities for different reasons. First of all, because of the price of the electricity that can be very attractive over a long term. And indeed, the visibility on the price for a longer period also makes it easier for municipality to plan financially to do their budget. So this is an additional advantage. The second advantage is the fact that via PPAs they can support the production of renewable energy and progress towards their CO2 reduction targets. So potentially towards achieving their sustainability goals, while also giving more visibility to their climate actions. And the third advantage is that they can promote the local economy, especially if the PPAs are contracted to develop new projects on their territories. So they can really support local RES developer, increasing the number of RES projects in their area. And they can also potentially support citizen energy if the RES developer is an energy community. But at the same time, the PPAs present some challenges for municipalities as well, namely the credit risk of the developer, because in order for the electricity to be delivered during this agreed period of time, it is important that the supplier is financially stable. And because indeed, if it goes insolvent, then the buyer would incur important financial damages. As Bram already pointed out in his presentation, the good news is that the EU legislation now foresees the possibility to set up state-based guarantees with the national government stepping in. So basically to cover for part of the losses incurred. So this is definitely a possible, a mitigated risk, let's say now. Then there is the market risk as well, because this is more like due to the variable nature of wind and solar, but also to the changes in market condition, for example, rising price of commodities on the raw materials that are needed for the installations. So this can impact the feasibility for a RES developer to deliver on the agreed terms of the PPAs. Then another challenge, which has been very important according to the municipalities that we've been in touch with, is the national legal framework, because changes in the legislation or the legal definitions even might affect or prevent the municipality really to use PPAs, to subscribe PPAs. For example, up until not long ago, in France, it was not possible to sign contracts that were longer than 2 years. So then now this is not the case anymore, but this is still the case in other EU member states. And also, there are procurement legislation that can prevent the municipality from adding non-financial criteria that would, for example, facilitate the participation of local developers, such as energy community, to the tenders. So this is another potential obstacle of doing PPAs with non-commercial developers. And finally, the PPAs are a complex process. So it's not possible in all municipalities to devote the human resources that are needed. And also some municipalities, they don't have internally the knowledge on legal aspect and the technical aspect that is needed to subscribe a PPAs. So sometimes cities, they can go around that by hiring external support, but indeed this is not given for all municipalities, especially not for the smaller municipalities. Then what step municipalities can be taken by municipalities in order to facilitate at least the potentially the use of PPAs? Well, first of all, they need to really look at the goals that they would like the PPAs to contribute to. So for example, if the objective is the PPAs to stimulate local production, they will have to look, for example, at the different actors that are already active in the area. Are there citizen groups that could potentially apply for this tender? Or another step that they can do is to really look at the energy picture of the municipality. So the consumption and other possible companies that would be able to apply. And then they can also check the rules and the contract. So what is the PPA? A PPA something that it's suitable for them? What type of PPAs is the most is the best one for them? Or is there a way, as was mentioning before, Bram was mentioning before, to pool demands and maybe act together with other municipalities in order to benefit from more attractive prices? What is the procurement law in the country, and what are the definitions? Definitions sometimes they change. What is the, sometimes we had cases of municipalities saying that they wanted to contribute to the local energy production, but then the definition of local in the national legislation changed, and so if they became aware of this when it was a bit too late, and it was complicated for them to say that the PPAs was contributed to their climate goals, because the definition of locals in the legislation changed. So indeed, there are a lot of aspects that municipalities need to take into account. But overall, by talking with a few municipalities, we found out that there are some commonalities when of successful cases of PPAs between municipalities and a commercial entity, an energy provider, sorry. And so the commonalities for success, so this is what we call recipe for success, is the political buy-in. So indeed, we need it needs to be, a decision needs to be taken politically, because the resources needed are quite important, and the knowledge as well. So you need political support to embark in this process. A dedicated team that is working on procurement, and more specifically that will be working on the PPA. The legal expertise, and I was mentioning before that sometimes this is lacking within the municipality, especially the smaller municipalities. In this case, looking for external support is a must. In some countries, like for example in Belgium, this can be received by entities that are not 100% commercial, so that the help can be a bit cheaper for the municipalities. Others really need to recur to external consultants. There are also templates that can be used as a reference, let's say, and maybe Annie might mention this later in her presentation. The recommendation is also to keep it relatively simple for when it's the first time, because indeed there is no need to procure for a big volume of electricity if this is the first time. So by keeping the volume rather low, you will considerably reduce risk. So it's going to be easier. Of course, you will find much more in our briefing that I am showing right now. But also we have, sorry, I went too quickly. As Ian mentioned, we have our hub on locally owned renewables. And more specifically, we have a monthly bulletin that that focuses on the topic of community-owned renewables, and where you can also keep in touch for events, for more events, in case you are interested to events of this kind and publications like the one that I just presented. Back to you, Ian. Thank you.
So over to you, Annie. Timing is going great. So you're free to go, and there will be enough time for questions afterwards.
Super. Okay, well, thanks so much for inviting me. Really great to be part of Energy Cities webinar today. So this paper that Sara just presented was really great to read, and just hearing about the interest that cities do have in signing power purchase agreements. I can't promise today that I'm going to give you a complete rundown of how to sign a PPA, but at least I can give you an idea of some of the potential solutions and some next steps to get you started. So on the next slide, you can learn a bit more about us. So Resource was basically founded, if you could just go to the next slide, Sara, thank you, cool. Resource was founded to accelerate renewable energy corporate procurement. As you'll see in my presentation, this is not just an option for corporates, but public sector can do it too. Next slide, please. Bit more about how we achieve this, how we promote corporate procurement. We shape the regulatory environment, so any barriers that we would see on the regulatory level which could prevent procurement of renewables, we work to remove those barriers. We also provide lots of free tools to help organizations get started. So for instance, you can go to our website and browse to our buyer's toolkit, and there's a very basic introduction to energy sourcing, tools like a free template PPA contract, which you can download today from our website. We know lots of corporates have used this template as a basis of their deals, so you can also use it. It's freely available on our website. And then the final piece of the puzzle is really creating spaces where energy buyers and suppliers can meet and network and learn from each other, and hopefully go away and sign some deals. So what's been happening in the PPA market? On the next slide, you'll see how this has really taken off in recent years. So in last year, we had 10.4 gigawatts of wind and solar energy procured via power purchase agreements. So you can see that this is really helping to add new wind and solar farms to Europe's grids in support of the energy transition. You can see in the capacity for 2023, this was more led by solar, but we know that wind assets tend to actually generate more electricity because of the capacity factor. But clearly there's interest in sourcing both. And you can see there in the dark green, this is the renewables portfolio option, because buyers basically want to purchase different types of renewable energy sources to cover their load. Because in fact, wind and solar are actually very compatible in terms of production. There's different seasons, different times of the day. So actually procuring them together can be really effective. On the next slide, you can see some of the top markets to sign a PPA. So Spain has typically always led in this ranking. In Spain, there's obviously ample wind and solar resources, very strong demand and a good regulatory framework. And then that sort of translates into the smaller markets being those that perhaps have regulatory issues. So to give an example, in Romania, it was only legal to sign a PPA, I think about 2 years ago. So obviously the market is very small. In other countries, there might be very low industrial demand, or simply buyers are just not aware of tools like PPAs, and so are not signing them. In the next slide, just a bit of a rundown of the top companies that are signing a PPA. So as Resource, we want to get as many buyers as possible involved in PPAs because there are such good benefits. So Sara highlighted a bit about this hedging benefit. So really these predictable costs over a long period of time. And then of course, when you pair that with a guarantee of origin, so these are renewable energy certificates, you can then demonstrate that you're procuring renewables, which then can mitigate your scope 2 emissions. Because that's an important point, that the PPA in itself won't be able to account to your carbon accounting, but the guarantee of origin will really prove that it's a renewable source. So now we've got this Energy Cities paper. What can cities do as a next step? And on the next slide, I've just gathered together some examples of public sector organisations which have signed a PPA. So this one in the top corner with the group of UK universities is quite interesting because this was a multi-buyer PPA. So this is a bit like the kind of aggregated demand that Sara also mentioned, where multiple organisations can come together, pool their demand, share the risk and sign a PPA together. So this is particularly good if you perhaps have like a lower energy demand, or perhaps you can't prove bankability to be the single contracting party. But I think it's great to see what others are doing, and it's a bit of inspiration of what is possible. On the next slide, as I've mentioned, we do have a lot of resources on our website. So I really do recommend you to go and check out the Buyer's Toolkit. We've got reports there, we've got explanatory guides, we've got the template PPA contract. There's loads of stuff that you can read there, even things about more kind of advanced procurement topics like 24/7 and granularity. It's all freely available, so please do just check that out. If you have any questions when you're looking at that, just don't hesitate to reach out to the team and we can help you further. On the next slide, I just wanted to mention that not all companies are able to sign a PPA. Often the length of a PPA can be putting off. Often organizations can struggle to prove that bankability to show that they're credit worthy to sign a PPA. So I just wanted to point out there are different options. I think on-site generation is probably something as a cities sector are very familiar with. But then there's other options like green electricity supply. But with these other options, you should just watch out that if there's not a guarantee of origin, you can't prove that that electricity is green. So, the sort of creme de la creme is the PPA with GOs, which would really help your decarbonized strategy. On the next slide, so we also do offer a few events which are free of charge because we think it's just really important to get this market off the ground. So we like to organize things, and buyers can always come for free. So this is a great event in Amsterdam that we hold every year. This year it's at the end of October, and it's 3 days of learning and networking with energy suppliers, but also other energy buyers, because we think that community of energy buyers can be really helpful for companies to learn what others have done, what might work for you. And then we have a conference full of really great content where you can learn about all aspects of procurement. So really would welcome you to come and join that if you can. And then finally, on the next slide, we also have a hub. It's been great to hear about the Energy Cities Hub, but we have our Energy Buyers Hub. So this is an online meeting about every quarter where we hold presentations on different aspects of renewable procurement. You can ask a ton of questions, chat with other energy buyers, and it's just a really practical way to advance your own knowledge and your own strategy. So with that, I think I'm under time. Just wanted to say thank you so much for the opportunity to present. Really happy to answer any of your questions, either here or via email. And I wish you very good luck with the next steps of your renewable procurement journey.
Thank you very much, Annie. That was very clear and concise. So we now have about 10 to 15 minutes of question time. So far, within the chat, I have not seen too much chit-chat, so to speak. Is there anything? There was one comment, I think, that you made, Annie, during Bram's presentation. It was linked to prices,
maybe to
right?
add,
yeah,
it's about prices, because I think, one of the top questions I get asked is, what is the price of a PPA? No one really knows, because in the end, it's always a very bespoke deal. It depends on a lot of factors about the technology, the risk, where you are, the length of the contract. So it is quite an individualized thing, but I think it's helpful that Pexapark, I think they gather it from their own clients and just kind of theoretical assumptions about the market gives a bit of an indication. We know that the price roughly rises and falls as electricity markets do, but you just in the end have to agree a price with the supplier, but it's a nice indication.
Okay, great. I thought I'll get things rolling, mainly because my interest is in more the community energy side of things, and I can imagine that it could be pretty difficult for them to be involved, linked to the credibility, the having to have long-term bank credibility, that kind of stuff. Are there any examples currently? I noticed also most of the examples that you cited are from the UK for the moment. So first thing is about the involvement. Sarah did mention it, but I was wondering if you know if we could mention some examples of where it is actually happening. And then also why the UK is ahead of the game at the moment, and if you're seeing any movement in other EU countries.
So according to our data, it is just the UK. I think there was one that was in Finland. It was like the Pensions Authority or something. So to be very honest, I don't know why. It's just in the UK. Maybe they've just got more information, have sort of got early in the game. Maybe Bram has insights on that. So yeah, for that latter question, I don't know. But indeed, the first point you raise about proving bankability, we see this as a major barrier for energy buyers. It is a very long-term contract, and you basically have to prove that you're going to be able to fulfill, a 15-year agreement. So I think the interesting development, which Bram explained in the market design, is now that member states will be looking to put in place guarantee schemes. So you could basically have a state-backed PPA. At the moment, there's only a handful of these in existence. There's one that just started in France. There's one in Spain. There's one in Norway. So these schemes are kind of being tested out a bit to find some best practice and see how this could work. But in essence, these schemes should be popping up across the whole EU in the next few years. I think then that's a question of how it would work if it was a state-backed for a public authority. So maybe that's something to discuss in the hub. But I think definitely that would be a bit of a game changer in terms of helping companies to be able to prove that financial stability.
Excellent, thanks a lot. Bram, you want to come in?
Yeah, no, it's just on the experience of energy communities, maybe. I do think it's an interesting opportunity for them, and in the briefing we referred to a project in Ghent, in the city of Ghent of Belgium, where the city procured through PPA solar electricity, and the investor was or is a renewable energy cooperative, and it was one of the conditions for the city of Ghent that whoever they were signing with needed to provide in the possibility for local citizens to participate for a share of the project. So that's a model that I think is now being also used in the upcoming new offshore wind tender in Belgium. Supposed to be launched at the end of this year, where part of the output, part of the production of the new offshore wind farms will be reserved for energy cooperatives. A small share, because it's of course a very big capital-intensive project, but still it's an example of where the project will be financed through a combination of PPAs, corporate PPAs, CFDs, as well as community energy. So that's, I think, interesting. And there's other examples, like in Antwerp, the social housing company entity has also signed PPA for renewables for their tenants. And so, but unfortunately, and it'd be great to have better insights on this, we don't have the data to have a comprehensive view. And part of this is, of course, as Annie also alluded to, that this is a market, and these parties don't have an obligation and often not an interest to produce all or to publish all the details of the deals. and that's only fair. But sometimes it's a bit difficult to get a grasp of what's going on in different parts of Europe.
Stavroula, you're welcome to talk as well. I see you shared something about your members. You're welcome to switch on your video and have a little chat. Welcome.
Sure, happy to. Thanks a lot for the presentations. Very interesting topic, and actually for us it's very close to a discussion we have with our members, which is tomorrow on PPAs specifically. You already identified, so I'm Stavroula Papa from Rescue, and we represent energy communities and energy cooperatives around Europe. And of course, in countries, the energy community is a very new concept. It's not, PPAs is not something they're engaging with. But in countries where energy cooperatives already pre-existed the clean energy package and there is experience, we see that some of our members, like Somenergia, Goyaner in Spain, they are signing PPAs. Enercoup in France has experience with it. We have examples from Belgium. There is a question, I think, on the case of Belgium. If it's on energy communities, I would suggest that you reach out to Rescue Vlaanderen, that they have, it's the Flemish Federation, they have experience on the topic. We did identify, and in the context of the market design discussions, we gathered some barriers that our members are facing to feed into these discussions, and we're really happy to see, and as Bram and Annie indicated, that the Commission wanted to do something about making PPAs accessible to also smaller actors. And on this regard, we are looking forward to what will happen at the national level with the guarantee schemes. But I also know that the Commission is planning to work on a guidance on PPA. So that's also very interesting to maybe include something in there on energy communities, their barriers, and municipalities, and the barriers they're facing. So that will be something that is coming. But yeah, on more examples, we will discuss with our members internally and maybe share more experiences on energy communities engaging on PPAs soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you
much.
have more examples, would be really happy to receive that as well, because our data is basically on public announcements. So if a company does a press release, it normally comes in front of us. We don't capture 100% of the market. I think we estimate around sort of 80%. So it's enough to detect the trends, but indeed not all of them always land in our lap. So if you can share some examples, we'd love to put that into our database. So.
Great, things are going well. Looks like, do we have any more questions?
I was just going to add,
yes.
I mean, not in the cities sector. I didn't include them on my slide, but there are lots of PPAs being signed in the public transport sector. So, you know, public transport operators, rail companies, there's quite a lot of examples out there. So it also might be some learnings, because I think for the public sector, that's the biggest difference between just a corporate signing a PPA, is that they do have that public procurement tendering process, which can be quite difficult to navigate, because we had an example last year of TfL, so that's the London transport operator, tried to do this PPA tender and actually was very undersubscribed because it wasn't very well designed, and was actually very difficult for them to progress with that. But I think there's some learnings already in the transport sector that maybe is helpful for this group as well.
Great. What I suggest then, in order to conclude, is that each of the speakers, just a little final roundup or something, key sentence or something that you'd really want everyone to remember before they leave this webinar. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Thanks very much for the invite. It was great. I would hope that the participants would take away that facilitating investments in the renewables are a good way to deal with the risks of energy markets. And please go and look into it, and also look for assistance to set up these deals.
Thank you very much. Sara.
Well, I think for me, the key learning can be also that when you do energy procurement, it's often more than just energy procurement. So there are other things that you can tackle at the same time, and other aspects that are maybe non-directly energy related, but they can be impacted positively by your procurement.
Excellent. Thanks, Sara. And over to you, Annie, for final conclusion.
Yeah, well, I think use all of the freely available tools that Resource has, that Energy Cities has, because I think there are big opportunities for cities. And I think also looking, particularly to follow up what Bram was presenting about the changes in the electricity market design, there is now a legal basis that member states now have to really promote PPAs and help people to sign PPAs. So, really work together as a group at national and European level to make sure that implementation is effective and really helps you sign a PPA in the end.
Excellent. So big thanks to our three speakers, and thanks, of course, to everyone who turned up to listen, because if you weren't there, we wouldn't be here either. So if anyone does have any questions, you can send us an email, and then we can hopefully get the answer. And if we don't have the answer, we can hopefully find someone who does have the answer. And we will probably stop the recording now and be able to send the PowerPoints to everyone. So yeah, have a great end of the day, and thanks for joining us. Cheers.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.